On a sunny morning in May 2013, 3 shipwreck hunters, Jerry Eliason, Craig Smith, and Ken Merriman, set out in their 22-foot sea dory to find a shipwreck that hadn't been seen in almost a century. Even after multiple searches, the wreck remained elusive, one of the greatest mysteries of Lake Superior. But the team hoped that this time would be different. They were headed to an area designated by Jerry Eliason's wife, Karen, a software engineer who helped narrow their search to a quarter-mile area roughly 30 miles north of Marquette, Michigan. As they arrived at the search location, they deployed their side-scan sonar system, developed by Jerry's son, Jared. Soon, they detected a large anomaly. But they weren't going to let themselves get excited. The anomaly could have been anything. They sent down a drop camera to take a look. Their first pass picked up nothing. But on their second pass, they found the telltale signs of a large shipwreck. The lakebed was covered with iron ore. Finally, their camera found what they were looking for. The foremast of a large freighter appeared in the darkness. Then, they saw a pilot house. But they couldn't be sure if this was the wreck they were looking for until the next day when their camera passed over the ship's stern and finally found her nameplate. It was the Henry B. Smith, lost with all hands in the Great Lakes storm of 1913, almost exactly 100 years before. The wreck, beautifully preserved by the icy waters, could finally shed light on one of the greatest mysteries of Lake Superior. By November 1913, the Henry B. Smith was reaching the end of a disappointing season. The weather had been especially difficult that year, leading to a series of delays and costly late arrivals. The ship was owned by the Acme Transit Company, based out of Lorain, Ohio. The company's management had grown frustrated with the frequent delays and blamed Captain James Owen for the disappointing season. The 54-year-old captain had over 36 years of experience on the lakes. He was well loved by his crew, but he had a reputation for avoiding difficult weather. While avoiding taking chances with his ships and the lives of his crew would be commended now, in those days this caution was frowned upon. A vessel that stays in port doesn't make money, and maximum profit was the #1 priority, even over safety. Captain Owen commanded the Henry B. Smith since her launch in May of 1906. Designated hull number 343, the 6,631-ton steel-hulled bulk freighter was constructed by the American Shipbuilding Company in Lorain, Ohio. She was one of the largest freighters on the lakes at the time, measuring 545 feet or 166 meters long with a beam of 55 feet or 17 meters. She was powered by 2 Scotch Marine boilers that fed a single triple expansion steam engine, driving a single propeller. She was named after a prominent lumberman and managing owner of the Ludington Woodenware Company in Michigan. For this final run, the ship's owners were said to have issued a stern ultimatum to Captain Owen. Either deliver the Smith and her cargo on time, or this season would be his last with the company. This unreasonable ultimatum would ultimately have deadly consequences. From the moment the Henry B. Smith arrived in Marquette, Michigan on Thursday, November 6, 1913 to take on her iron ore cargo, it was clear that this was not going to be the smooth late-season run that Captain Owen was depending on. The ordinarily easygoing captain could barely contain his frustration. He intended to quickly load 10,000 tons of iron ore and immediately began their final run to Cleveland, capping off the season with one last on-time run, giving the ship owners nothing to complain about. But the weather had other plans. Before they could even begin loading, howling wind and blowing snow overtook the docks at Marquette. In the freezing conditions, the iron ore froze in the chutes. The only way to dislodge it was for dock workers to physically climb down the chutes and break the ore loose with sledgehammers. It was incredibly dangerous, and dock workers typically avoided working in such brutal conditions. But the captain was adamant that work continued. He needed the Smith ready to sail the moment the weather broke. The loading began Friday at a painfully slow rate. When work ended early Saturday morning, the freighter was still not fully loaded. The dock workers ordinarily would not have returned until Monday, but Owen demanded that they return on Sunday, November 9th to finish the job. They reluctantly agreed, and the captain asked the dock superintendent to wire the company to let them know that they were coming. As loading was completed that afternoon, Captain Owen's spirits seemed to have lifted. The storm had lulled, and it looked like they were going to get the window of calm they needed to make this final run. He knew it would be rough, but after 7 years with the HB Smith, Captain Owen had faith that his ship, loaded with 10,000 tons of iron ore to steady her, could handle the conditions. He even felt that having the wind at their back could help them reach the Sioux in good time, making up for some of the time they lost loading. Chatting with the dock workers, he was noted to make a few jokes about the ship cheating disaster, but few shared his confidence. At 4 p.m. on Sunday, November 9, 1913, with the heavy northwest seas crashing over the breakwater at Marquette, the Henry B. Smith nosed out of the harbor into Lake Superior. One can't help but wonder how long it took Captain Owen to realize that the storm that had caused their delay was only just getting started. The Great Lakes Storm of 1913 has many nicknames, but it's most commonly called the White Hurricane. While it wasn't technically a hurricane, the blizzard brought hurricane-force winds that battered 4 of the 5 Great Lakes for days. The first storm system began forming over the western side of Lake Superior on Thursday, November 6th, and made its way east toward Lake Michigan. Weather forecasting at the time was in its infancy, and there were few tools available to predict the direction or severity of a storm. By midday on November 8th, the first storm system had passed over Lake Superior and was moving east through northern Lake Huron. To many experienced sailors on the lakes, this seemed to be the worst of it, a brutal but somewhat typical 3-day blow. As the first storm moved east, Captain Owen would have recognized this pattern, but the storm system was anything but ordinary. As the first storm moved east over the region, another storm forming in the south was rapidly moving north, where it slammed into the first storm system late on November 9th. Over the next 24 hours, winds in the region exceeded hurricane force for extended periods of time. Wave heights were estimated at the time to have exceeded 35 feet or 11 meters, and modern simulations showed that waves could have actually been as high as 38 feet or almost 12 meters. Some waves reached even higher. The pilot house of the L.C. Waldo was completely smashed by a single wave on Lake Superior that was estimated to be as high as 50 feet or 15 meters. Captain Owen's confidence was not shared by others, and many felt that his decision to leave port that evening was rash and dangerous. Several observers on nearby vessels witnessed the Smith's deckhands still battening the ship's 32 hatch covers as they sailed for the open lake. It was incredibly irresponsible to sail into rough weather without making the ship watertight. Captain Charles Fox of another nearby freighter, the SS Choctaw, judged the conditions far too dangerous. He paused the unloading of his ship and waited out the storm, not leaving until the morning of November 11th. Captain Fox watched as the Henry B. Smith left port and wondered aloud how long it would be before the freighter would realize their error and return to port. Through the heavy snow, Captain Fox and others could see waves crash over the Smith's bow. As expected, the vessel soon made a hard turn to port. She was thrown into a deep trough, but managed to fight her way out before disappearing in the whiteout conditions. It's believed that Captain Owen quickly realized that the storm was more than his vessel could handle, and he made a last-minute effort to sail for the safety of Keweenaw Point. This dramatic attempt to save the ill-fated freighter was the last time any living person would lay eyes on the Henry B. Smith for nearly 100 years. As the storm finally began to clear, news of the devastation spread through the region. Numerous vessels were unaccounted for. While Captain Owen's message was received that the Henry B. Smith left port, there was no sign of her at the Sioux Locks. But for a time, there was hope that she was one of the nearly dozen vessels that were blown on shore by the storm, stranded on some remote corner of the lake. Information was scarce. At the offices of the Port Huron Times-Herald newspaper, a father of one of the Smith's crew members visited, desperate for news that his son might still be alive. When they told him that they knew nothing, he responded tearfully, "I just plain can't tell his mother he's gone. It would kill her." A few days after the storm, the body of second cook H.R. Haskin was found floating 50 miles west of Whitefish Point. Then, in the spring of 1914, the skeleton of third engineer John Gallagher was found on Isle Parisienne. They were the only bodies ever found out of the 25-member crew. Few other traces of the Smith were found. In June 1914, a bottle and a message was picked up. It claimed that the ship broke in two 12 miles east of Marquette, but the message was dismissed as a fake because it was dated November 12th. The Smith most likely sank on the evening of the 9th or the very early hours of the 10th at the latest. The bottle message only added to the mystery of the Smith. Over the years, nearly all of the major vessels lost in the storm of 1913 were discovered, some only a few days after the storm, shedding light on what might have happened in their final moments. But from the moment the Smith faded out of view, she passed into the unknown until her wreck was finally discovered 100 years later, lying only 30 miles from her point of departure, broken in two at the bottom of Lake Superior. What exactly caused her to sink remains unknown. It could be that her crew didn't finish securing her hatches before water began breaking over her deck and pouring into the ship. It's possible that she suffered a hull fracture that caused her to break in two in the heavy seas. But no one knows for sure. The Great Lakes Storm of 1913 claimed 19 ships and stranded over a dozen others. Over 270 people lost their lives. It remains the deadliest storm in the history of the lakes. When reading about maritime disasters, you frequently come across captains who were faced with impossible life or death decisions that you, in the comfort of your home, safe on land, could never even imagine. But in the case of the Henry B. Smith, the correct decision was obvious, even to fellow captains in Marquette at the time. Captain Fox of the Choctaw, though hesitant to speak ill of another captain, was shocked to see the Henry B. Smith leave port that stormy afternoon. It was clear to him, and several others who were present that day, that even a modern vessel like the Smith probably wouldn't make it in those conditions. Captain Owen was a respected captain, known for his cautiousness. What he did that day was out of character, but he was under enormous pressure. Staying in port probably meant saying goodbye to the career that he had dedicated his life to. Ultimately, the final decision was his, but the alternative probably felt unimaginable. He knew that he was taking a significant risk, but no one thinks that it will happen to them. Captains believe in their ships, even when they've been set up to fail. Thank you so much for watching. I'm curious what you think of Captain Owen's decision. Do you think it's fair to blame him for the situation, or should blame fall on the company? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, help out the channel with a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories like this one. We're getting tantalizingly close to my goal of 100,000 subscribers, so you should be one of them. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon. They're the best crew a captain could ever ask for. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.